With the global pandemic starting to hit around the world, unemployment skyrocketing and GDP falling through the floor, it got me thinking, how many of us live paycheck to paycheck? And how many of us have an emergency fund to fall back on when times get tough? Well, according to a study in 2018, which was pre-COVID-19, over a quarter of British adults have no savings, and 58% of Americans have less than $1,000 to fall back on during difficult times. And I think it's fair to say, difficult times are definitely ahead. Some could say, winter is coming. In today's video, I'm going to talk about one of the most fundamental building blocks of personal finance, the emergency fund. I'm going to talk about what it is, why you need one, how much you need to save, where you should keep it, and how you can save the money. And I'm going to throw in a cheeky bonus at the end. So let's get into it. Let's take it back to basics. What is an emergency fund? Well, it's called an emergency fund for two reasons. Firstly, it's there for unforeseen expenses, such as car maintenance, medical bills, that parking ticket that you got. But it can also be really helpful in the unlikely event there's a global pandemic spreading across the world, decimating economies, and putting your job at risk. Oh wait, sound familiar? The second reason it's called an emergency fund is because if you don't have one, it's an emergency that you get one. Seriously, this is the first and most important step on your financial journey and should 100% be your focus before anything else, including paying off debt. And I'll explain why later. If you're new to my channel, this is where we talk about personal finance and investing, and I take you on my journey to financial freedom. Complete transparency, warts and all. So if you want to learn to earn, click that like button below and hit subscribe. So the next question is, how much money do you need to have saved away in your emergency fund? Let's consider the worst case scenario, that you're made redundant or you lose your job. You need to have enough money saved away in your emergency fund to cover you until you can find another source of income or get another job. For many financial commentators, especially on YouTube, they can say anywhere between 1 month through to 3 years. But for me, I think the sweet spot is 6 months. Ultimately, the decision is a balance between having enough money to get by in case of the unexpected versus putting that money to better use elsewhere by investing. Having less than 6 months in an emergency fund would keep me up at night. If I lost my job, I wouldn't want to be in a position where I was forced to sell my other investments, such as index trackers or real estate, just to get by at a potentially bad time in the market. On the flip side, saving more than 6 months' money in my emergency fund means that I'm missing out on opportunities of deploying that capital elsewhere, where I can get a better rate of return and it can compound over time. That would include putting it into my stocks and shares index trackers, or saving a deposit for another buy-to-let real estate property, or starting a new business, or one of the most undervalued investments there is out there, which is an investment into your own skill set. To work out your emergency fund number, you've got to first know your burn rate, i.e. how much money you spend on critical expenses every month. Critical expenses include rent or mortgage payment, insurances, fuel, utilities, debt obligations for something like a student loan, food and groceries, internet and mobile contract, and any other long-term contracts that you're locked into, such as a gym membership. If you want more wiggle room, it can also include more discretionary spending like eating out or going on a night out. But remember, the more you account for here, the more you'll have to keep locked away in an account that may not be optimum for your longer-term goals. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the UK. But in 2013, my wife and I moved to Qatar in the Middle East for greater job opportunities and better weather. It's important to take into consideration the context of where you'll be living during this period. For example, because the cost of living in Qatar is so much higher than other parts of the world, I account for an emergency fund of £3,500 a month. But if I was to go back to the UK, it'd likely be a lot lower, which would give us extra buffer room. So make sure you take into consideration of where you want to be or what you'd be doing during this time period. Next, let's talk about where you should keep your emergency fund. And a hint, it's not under the mattress. Instead, you should take into consideration 3 things. Number 1, you want to ensure that the money is accessible and available whenever you need it. That means it can't be locked away in something like a fixed term bond where you'll be charged for early withdrawal. Number 2, you want to ensure that the money is protected, i.e. it's government backed by Financial Services Compensation Scheme in the UK or the SIPC in the US, just in case. Hence, cash under the mattress doesn't work. Nowadays, most bank institutions are protected, but make sure you double check. Number 3, and most importantly, you want to keep it separate from your day-to-day current account. This way, you're not tempted to dip into your emergency fund where there's something you want but can't quite afford, like when the new iPhone comes out or the upcoming PS5. For me, I keep around £2,000 in a current account, and the rest I keep in premium bonds. If you don't know what a premium bond is, it's quite unique. They're a UK government issued investment product where instead of being paid interest on your savings, you are entered into a monthly prize draw where you can win between £25 and £1 million tax-free. It's sort of a monthly lottery, but you don't lose the price of the ticket. The biggest issue with any accessible savings account is that after interest and inflation, you tend to end up losing money. Let me explain. Inflation is the rate at which price levels generally increase over time. For example, Freddos have increased in price from 10p to an eye-watering 30p over time. The interest rate on savings is how much money you get given for lending your money to the bank. For example, if you put £1,000 in a bank account at a 1% interest rate, at the end of that year, you'll have £10 in interest and have £1,010 overall. However, if inflation is running at 2%, your £1,010 would now only be worth the equivalent of what roughly £990 would have bought you at the start of the year. So, in real terms, you've actually become poorer. With premium bonds, there isn't an interest rate. Instead, they have what is called a prize rate. Currently standing at 1.4%, it acts in a very similar way. Instead of getting an interest rate on all the money you deposit, each of your deposits then becomes a ticket for the lottery. However, as the minimum prize is £25, you'd actually need a deposit of around about £5,000 and average luck to get anywhere near that 1.4% interest rate. That's why a lot of people don't like premium bonds, because if you have less than that £5,000, there's a very good chance that you will lose money in real terms. But for me, I think the potential of winning a large cash prize, say up to £1 million, is actually worth that risk. I'd rather have the opportunity to get lucky and win big than guarantee a loss by putting it in a low interest savings account. As a side note, I also think there's great psychological value in the way that premium bonds are like a lottery. The gamification of it makes sure that you always want to keep your money invested and you think twice before withdrawing it. For more information on premium bonds, I put a link below in the description. If premium bonds aren't for you, then another option is to set up a separate savings account. Now, it's important that this savings account isn't linked to a credit card or debit card, and there is some difficulty in transferring the money from one account to another. The time it takes to log on and transfer the money would actually prevent you, in many cases, from doing so in the first place and touching those funds. Now, before we go into how best to set yourself up for success with your savings, I just want to take a step back and address what I said earlier about why I think you should actually create an emergency fund before paying off any additional debt. If you have a student loan or a credit card with debt that you're paying off, then you might be thinking, wait, shouldn't I be paying that off first? But the way that I think about it is, well, if whilst you're paying off that debt and emergency strikes, what would happen? The lack of the emergency fund would mean that if disaster strikes, then you'd have to go back and add on more debt in the form of a high interest credit card or a payday loan. Because of the nature of that loan, it's likely that you would need it immediately. You're going to end up paying really high interest on it. And if you're not careful, you end up getting yourself into a debt cycle where more interest means more debt that you can't pay off, which means more interest, which means more debt that you can't pay off, which means more interest and more debt that you can't pay off until at some point you go bankrupt. Therefore, as a general rule of thumb, I'd say that making an emergency fund should be your priority. Yes, continue to make those minimum payments on those debts so they don't get out of hand. But the priority should always be to any extra cash to put it away to one side in that emergency fund. And then once you're there or part of the way there, then you can go back to servicing the debt and paying off that debt quicker. Now we know what an emergency fund is, let's get into talking about how do we save for it. In short, you have two paths that you can take, and you can actually take both those paths at the same time. Path number 1, reduce your costs. Now, there are thousands of YouTube videos out there on how to save money, reduce expenses, don't buy that coffee, etc. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But I am going to give you 3 tricks that I use. Number 1, I stopped using my credit card, full stop. Now, there are a lot of people out there who will be thinking, what about the credit card reward points? But I decided if I couldn't afford to put it on my debit card, then either I'd wait and save up for it, or I wouldn't have it at all. Most of the time, when I did wait to save up for something, when it came to actually purchasing it, I realized it might not be as important as I thought it was. Number 2, I pay myself first. When I started out on my personal finance journey, I read the book The Richest Man in Babylon, which I'll link in the description below. In that book, they tell you, take 10% of all you earn and put it away into another savings account. Now, at first you think, but I can't live on just 90%. I can hardly make ends meet now. But trust me, you put that 10% away at the start of the month and then you forget about it. And over time, you slowly adapt to living off just that 90%. Whilst that 10% over there is growing and growing and growing and compounding and growing until before you know it, you've got a pile of money set to one side. Number 3, save the change. Every time you purchase something, round up to the nearest pound. Now, you don't have to do this yourself because there are a number of internet bank accounts out there now with apps that will do this for you. If you're in the UK, check out the Monzo app. It comes highly recommended. And these little savings over time can really build up. Path number 2, increase your income. Now, this is super powerful because taking the time and more importantly, taking action to increase your income will make everything else so much easier. After this video, I want you to take the time to list out ways of making extra income. It could be as simple as doing overtime at work, selling things around the house that are collecting dust on eBay, or starting a YouTube channel like I am and trying to get it monetized by asking people to hit that like button. Increasing your income acts like rocket fuel to achieve your personal finance goals. Lastly, as the bonus content, I want to talk about mindset. Because everything we've talked about in this YouTube video is fairly straightforward, but it's not easy. And the difference between doing it and not doing it always tends to come down to mindset. Firstly, you need to know your why. Why is it that you want an emergency fund? Is it so that you can sleep better at night knowing you can support your family in case something went wrong? Or do you want options? The options to be able to change job or have some time off? Whatever your why is, make sure it's very clear because it'll really help you stick to your goals. Next, I want you to think about setting targets. Yes, the target might be to get 6 months worth of expenses behind you, but also set intermediary targets along the way. That may be having 2 weeks or 1 month's worth of savings behind you, or just agreeing to put 5% of your income away at the start of the month until you can grow up to 10%. Having these small targets and then rewarding yourself when you hit those targets can be extremely powerful. These small rewards when you hit these intermediary targets can help keep you motivated across the whole journey. That is, as long as they don't push you back too far because the reward is too big. Lastly, give yourself accountability and set stakes. I want you to tell people about what your financial goals are and when you'll hit them by. Even make a bet with them, because studies show that losing a bet or the fear of losing a bet and setting deadlines are by far the biggest motivators in human behavior. So comment below and tell me what your goals are and when you'll hit them by, and I'll make sure I keep you accountable. So that being said, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't done so already, hit the like button and subscribe for more weekly content on personal finance and investing. And if you know somebody who could benefit from watching this video, please share it with them. I want to leave you with a quote. Save your money today because one day the money may save you. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.